So with that, I will introduce Britt Miller needs no introduction, but I will introduce Britt. She is the member of the Global Management Committee. She's also the managing partner for the Chicago office here, and she's also the co-lead for the the Global Antitrust and Competition Group. And her national practice, it focuses on high stakes litigation and related government investigations. And thank you, Britt, for being here. I really appreciate. I personally think that having Britt here, who is somebody who is a very visible partner at the firm, being part of the management committee, being the Chicago's managing partner. I've also personally noticed that associates come to Britt for advice, not just within her litigation group, but also throughout. And she has made herself very available. And it's really fantastic to have Britt as an ally to the LGBT community and to the firm's diversity and inclusion efforts. So thank you, Britt, for being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
And next, Amrit, of course, our guest of honor. And Amrit, there's a lot to cover, so I'm going to actually read a little bit here. But he used to be an attorney here in Mayor Brown in 2015 to 2017, about that time frame. And then after that, he continued to practice law in Miami, and then became a member of a cast show, which is a Bravo TV show called Family Karma. It is a docu-series that follows the lives of 6 multi-generational South Asian families in Miami. And we will talk a lot more about that. His moving story of coming out to his late grandmother on camera on the show live was instrumental to the show, earning a nomination for Best Original Reality Series at the 2022 GLAAD Media Awards. Amrit has also been honored in the Out Magazine Out 100 list, which is the largest annual portfolio recognizing members of the LGBTQ+ community for the groundbreaking, ripple-inducing, and culture-shifting impact nationwide. So Amrit, thank you for being here. Finally, I just wanted to recognize the LGBT affinity group itself and the Asian American and Pacific Islander affinity group for help setting this up and for collaborating to have this set up. So with that, Amrit, I want to just start with, I don't need cards for that because it's softball questions. We really just want to get to know your personal background initially, your family being from India, South Asian community, how your family ended up in the United States, in Miami, and your story of upbringing and just being a kid and a kid who's gay and in South Asian family.
Sure, totally. Make sure this works. First and foremost, thank you, Luis, and thank you, Britt, and the Mayor Brown family for having me. I was just telling Britt, it's so unreal to come back to the office and even walking through the lobby and going up the elevator and just saying, oh, this has changed, this hasn't changed. It's a really nice feeling. I actually remember my last day at Mayor Brown, I went to Britt's office to say goodbye, and she said, you always have a home here at Mayor Brown. I really appreciate that. So thank you for having me. My background, let's see. Born and raised in Miami, which you don't hear too often, born on Miami Beach. My parents immigrated to the United States in the late 70s. My dad came here first to work for his green card, was able to get that, then brought my mom over. Growing up as an Indian first-born generation American, I just didn't quite understand how unique my story was and how unique my story was going to be. I didn't realize that the other people around me, especially when I was in school and when I saw non-Indian folks, I didn't realize that they had been in this country for generations and their grandparents were born here and sometimes their great-grandparents were born here. And I was thinking, wow, I'm the first one that's born here. So it was it was very challenging. There were many times where I would be in school and I would realize that I was different, but I wouldn't, and not even different in the sense struggling with my sexuality, just different because of the color of my skin. And I'm sure, other Indians can attest to it, whether it was people mispronouncing my name or people not understanding. I remember one story, I was with my older brother. I always had to tag along with him. He hated that, but I always tagged along. I was with his friends at his friend's birthday party. I felt so cool. And someone asked me, what do you eat at home? And I was so young. I think my brother was old enough to realize, just say like chicken or hot dogs, just say something. But I was so young and innocent and clueless. And I was like, oh, we eat dal, D-A-A-L, which is a traditional Indian dish. And I just remember thinking all the kids at the table started laughing and they were like, oh, but you eat dolls, and they just didn't understand it. I remember thinking, and I could tell my brother was so embarrassed. I think I'm off topic, but that's just one example of it started hitting me that, I was different. I was an ethnic individual, in school, living in America. So I got used to it we all got used to it. And I left Miami for college. I was never a big Miami boy. I tend to like, the more traditional American cities, like Chicago, like Boston, like New York. But I ended up going to Atlanta for my undergraduate degree. And then I ended up going to law school. I graduated from Washington University in St. Louis. And then I became a young attorney.
Excellent, excellent. What's a Miami boy? I'm from Miami. I don't have to
What's a
Miami
Miami
boy.
boy? I don't love the ocean. I don't love the sand. I love colder temperatures sometimes. Just those typical like traditional Miami things that you would think about.
Right.
Never struck.
Well, we brought in Miami weather for you today.
But I did exactly.
On
Thank you.
purpose, just for you.
I feel at home in more ways than one.
I can deliver sand, not ocean, but I'm sure we can come up with some sand.
There's sand here in Chicago. Plenty of it, actually. That's why I love it, because I feel like Chicago and Miami actually have a lot of similarities.
Okay, you're gonna have to explain that one to me someday. Someday you're gonna have to explain that one.
So interestingly enough, I was talking to Amrit earlier. Apparently, we went to the same high school, Miami Palmetto Senior High School, which is where Justice Brown is from.
Correct.
So big shoes to be filled for your attorney career.
Well, you sort of answered one of my questions, which was how did you end up in Chicago? I mean, you go Miami, Emory, Wash U. Now you're back to Chicago. And so how did you from Wash U, how did you end up in Chicago, and how were we lucky enough to have you for as long as we had you, which you said was 5 years ago, which I can't believe.
Well, okay, so the first answer to that question, I always joke with people. I started migrating my way towards the north, and I would tell people, Alaska is my next stop. I'm going to take the Alaska bar and just settle down there. I don't know, I worked at Northwestern for 2 summers when I was in college, and I absolutely fell head over heels in love with the city. Granted, it was a summer, but I just remember driving down from Evanston to the city. I worked at the Center for Talent Development, which is a summer enrichment academy for really bright young students, and I was an RA and a TA for their classes. And I remember driving down from Evanston along the lake and looking out the window and just being like, this city is so magical. It is just so magnificent. And ever since then, I knew that I wanted to be in Chicago. I knew that I wanted to be at a law school that would feed well into the Chicago legal market. And I knew that I wanted to spend some time in the city. So that's what brought me to Chicago. And I also knew right around the time I was graduating from law school, I really started to begin understanding my sexuality and the issues that I was dealing with. I mean, I had spent so many years pushing that off, repressing. Maybe it'll just go away. Maybe I don't have to deal with it. And then you reach a point where you're like, I know I have to deal with it. It's not going away. And I knew that I could only do that in a city like a Chicago, like a New York, where you had a vibrant, diverse community available to you. And it was also far away from home, so that helped. And I ended up in Chicago. And then the next question, how I ended up at Mayor Brown. Honestly, I couldn't tell you. My trajectory and my background is a little bit different in that I didn't start off obviously in Mayor Brown. I came in later as a more experienced attorney. And I remember I saw a job posting. I said, I do have the experience for this. I should try. I should, submit my papers and see how it works. And I ended up interviewing for the position, and I ended up meeting Michelle Dora, who we worked hand in hand, and she was the person that kept me sane. And I remember talking to her and saying, Michelle, I think I could really excel in this position. And, I would love the Mayor Brown experience, and I would love the Mayor Brown training, which is just immeasurable as an attorney. I mean, you just don't get that kind of sophisticated training. And I realized this was my time to do it. I have the hours, I have the time, I could put in the work and put in the effort, and what better place to do it than Mayor Brown? So that brought me here in 2015.
I feel like I need to record that as a recruiting
tool.
Both for Chicago and for Mayor Brown. So you you obviously came in as a lateral. You did litigation while you were here. Was it something about litigation as opposed to the transactional practices that drew you? Was it something specific about the kind of work we did here, or what was it that brought you to practice in litigation?
Sure. The position itself, the available position, was a very good fit for me because it was some of the work that I was doing at my prior firm. You know, I started doing corporate restructuring as a newly minted attorney, typically debtor transaction, trustees transaction. And then I went to a different firm and started doing more of the creditor side representations and some of the work that I did at Mayor Brown. So the transition worked out so seamlessly because I had already acquired the skill set that I needed to work on the cases that were waiting for me at Mayor Brown if I was offered the position. So I thought, you know, this is a great fit. I also realized that sometimes it is nice to have experience both in transactional and litigation work. Because there's so much overlap between the two. And it always happens. A corporate restructuring attorney will tell you, yes, there's litigation that happens in our cases. A real estate attorney will tell you, yes, litigation, IP. I mean, litigation is sort of ubiquitous. It's everywhere. So, you know, I thought, what better way? One, I have the skill set for this position. Two, I would love to expand my litigation training. You know, why not do it at Mayor Brown? Let's see if I could get the position. And then I did.
Right. I was going to ask something that you said earlier before we started going into kind of too much of the professional, but on the personal aspect of it, you noticed, you mentioned about coming out, and you mentioned, I think that you said when I first realized that I was gay, when I first realized myself. So I was curious if you could go through, I was talking to Britt actually earlier this week, and we were talking about coming out and how we're going to ask you this question. I've kind of, you know, remembered how coming out is actually not a one-time thing in your life. You come out several times. I think that you started with yourself. So maybe tell us a little bit about what age you were, how that took place, and the other coming outs. Was it, you know, yourself, then your friends, and your family, or which order? Because I think for everyone it's actually pretty different. Sometimes you come out, sometimes people come out on your behalf, but
it is, you know, it is very different. And you soon realize that when you're struggling with your sexual orientation, coming out isn't the most terrifying thing in the world. And then once you get past it, you realize actually how beautiful the process can be. And it is different from person to person, and it makes it even more beautiful. I could remember as far back as 5th grade that I was, and I keep using the term different. I can remember as far as 5th grade that I was different. We went on a field trip and we were collecting shells on the ocean. I think we were learning something about the ocean or marine biology. I'm not sure what it is, but we were collecting shells and we had to partner up. And I really wanted to be a partner with my friend, Michael Gordon. But it was, you're so young and innocent, and it's just a longing to be with someone. It obviously has nothing to do with sexuality because you're too young. But it was just this longing. I wanted to be his partner, you know, for on the field trip. And then as you grow older, your mind develops and you start really, it sort of goes in many directions. I started coming out, it was after college, it was into law school. And for me, unfortunately, it revolved around alcohol because it was only after I had had a few drinks that I was comfortable enough to accept it myself and comfortable enough to actually say the words out loud to people. Like, I didn't even want to use the word gay because it frightened me. It was scary. So I started this trend of drunkenly coming out to people. And I'm just going to be honest and real because, you know, I think that's important. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it and tell you, no, I was, you know, so confident. I did it at a speech in front of all my students. No, it was very much like a very scary thing for me. So, you know, we'd be out at a law school event and I would feel confident enough and I would tell a friend. And then the next morning I would remember it and I'd be like, oh my gosh, what did I do? And I would pray that they would never bring it up. And for the most part, they wouldn't bring it up. But my one friend, Melissa, said, we should grab brunch the next day. I said, okay, let's grab brunch. We go to brunch. She says, well, we should talk about what you told me last night. And I just remember my heart just sank 6 feet under the ground. I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. You knew exactly what she was talking about. but it was so important for me because that conversation needed to happen sober. And that conversation needed to happen when I was there and I was processing it because there was no way I was going to move forward and progress. And in life, you always need to progress because you just can't be stagnant. It's not worth it. So I remember that was my first step. And then after there, it just got easier and easier and easier until it was time to tell my parents, because you realize that your parents and your immediate family are like the end all be all. Like you realize telling friends is it becomes really cool, but telling your parents is just a whole other level of acceptance and realizing that this is it. Like then I'll be done with coming out. So I strategically planned this. There's always a method to the madness. I was spending my last semester of law school in Shanghai, and I was leaving. It was the spring, so I was going to leave in January for Asia and say, "Sayonara, America. I'm gone for 6 months." And I said, "This is the perfect time to tell my parents." And I told them over the holidays because I knew I was going to be gone. And I think for them, I needed them to process it, and I needed myself to process it, and we had to do it away from each other. That I knew for sure. So I dropped the bomb on them, and it was tough, and they were not expecting it. But it happened, and then I spent the next 6 abroad. I came back, and even then, it was just this continuing, ongoing conversation because when I first told them, they said, "Well, no, phase all the stuff that everyone else has heard. It's a phase. Let's have you talk to a spiritual master because he can, show you the light and guide you, or just everything you've heard about parents' reactions and trying to not accept it." But they came, they educated themselves with the help of my siblings. They watched movies, they read the books, and they realized, wow, like, we'd rather have our son with us in the flesh, even if he's gay, than not have him in our life at all, because that's not the option they wanted. So, I said I did it, and I came out to them. I said, "We're done. This is it." And then there was one last coming out, which maybe you guys have seen or not seen, but there was one ultimate last coming out, which just happened last year. But the process itself, it can be easy, it can be hard. It depends who you're telling, really. It depends who you're telling. It depends on your comfort level with that person. So that I think really determines how easy or difficult it is going to be to come out to that person.
There are two things you said that I want to go back to if I can. First thing you said was you had this fear and you weren't going to sugarcoat it. And I think that's really important, that people can embrace their fear, they can be comfortable with their fear because it's a scary process.
Yeah.
And people need to know that there's something after the fear and it's not just that. But you also said that you thought with your parents that was the last time you were going to come out. Obviously, for those that haven't seen it, the one on TV, I'm sure he'll talk about in a second. I'm still catching up on the episodes, so that one's still coming. So, spoiler alert. But is it really? I've heard Luis and I did have this conversation, and it seems to be a not constant, but you come out to different people at different times in different ways. And so, was setting aside your grandmother, is it really the last time you are coming out, or is that something that you see you having to do again and again in different situations?
Good point. You're right. It probably isn't the last time I'll come out. It was the last time that I was very nervous about the reaction that I was going to get. That was the last time for that, because you're right. You're going to come out, whether it's to colleagues, whether it's to new friends, whether it's to family members that join your family. I mean, you're going to constantly come out. I introduced my husband, and that's coming out. That's how easy it is now. Oh, this is my husband. No, that before it was just like, oh, what do I say, and how are they going to react? Now it's my husband. I didn't think twice about it. Surprise! He doesn't have, he's not wearing a dress, he doesn't have long hair. He's a man. So it's just easier. But when I told my grandmother, it was the last time that I was very, very nervous about how to do it, how to have that conversation with her, and what her reaction was going to be.
Sure, I was glad to see that there was a ring on the finger and he was here. I got a proposal. But I was like, the wedding wasn't on TV, so congratulations, welcome. So congratulations.
Thank you.
To you as well.
Thank you.
I think that the marriage equality has really helped, that progression of the law has really helped the community be able to be accepted throughout, because even coming out to your parents, so I would say, I'm sure your parents being South Asian, my parents, from Brazil, Latin America, we share some similarities. You had the question when he came out, it was before marriage equality, and you have the question, well, does that mean you're never going to marry now? I wanted you to have a wedding. And now I think it helped a lot with that.
And that's so important, because the generations before us, they fought so hard for us to be where we are. and I feel like at that point in time when you came out, it sort of was like, well, what kind of life am I going to have? You know, I'm gay, I've accepted it, but am I going to get married? Am I going to have kids? Am I going to have a family? Or is my life just going to be alone and just me? And it was important for me to understand that this is not like a death sentence for me being gay. You know, it's not near that. It is there are going to be some extra hurdles, which, you know, I'm not, I'm a realist. I understand that there will be some extra hurdles, some extra hiccups, things might be a little bit complicated, but I can still do it. And I wanted my story on the show to show people that you can still do that. You can still have a full life. You can still get married, still have kids, still have that house with the white picket fence, all of it, you know, as cheesy as that sounds, because listen, we all love that. We all want that, right? So, you know, then, so that's why, you know, that's why I wanted to do Family Karma, and why I wanted to put myself out there and tell my story.
I don't know that I've ever wanted a white picket fence, but I'll keep that in mind. But your coming out to your grandmother on the show was such a powerful and impactful image, not just for people for LGBTQ, but for people, Indian people, and other people of color. You're now, like it or not, somewhat of a role model, and I, you know, you seem to take that very seriously. What does that look like? What is that? How has that changed your life now, and how do you see it continuing to impact your life going forward?
It is a lot of pressure, but it is so rewarding, Britt. You know, putting aside the coming out, you know, story in season 2, even season 1, when we first did the show and it was about to air, I remember sitting down with my parents and I said, listen, this is it, mom and dad, because, you know, I've come out to my immediate network and my immediate friends and my circle, but they hadn't, they weren't ready to do that yet. And I said, this is going to be my coming out to the country and the world, whoever's watching it. I mean, we have cousins in Dubai and in Hong Kong and Europe, and they might watch this, and you have to understand that this is it. And, you know, they said, we're ready. If this is going to help, not just people that are struggling with their sexuality, but even as importantly, parents that are struggling with their children, if this is going to help them, then we're ready to do it. And we're ready to be those role models. And once season 1 aired, it was out there, and I just got, oh my gosh, so many positive messages, so many just inspirational words from people that had been struggling, because, you know, Family Karma was groundbreaking for more than one reason. One, it was the first time you saw a full Indian cast on TV, and it was about time. I don't know why it took this long. Very long overdue. I mean, you would see one-off cast members on like The Simpsons and Big Bang Theory, but they were always playing these very stereotypical Indian roles. And it was like, enough, because that's not us. We're Indians living in America. We're born in America. And you need to see how our stories really are with our parents. So that was groundbreaking. And then 2, being South Asian and being gay and being out and being confident and embracing it. I think that was also really important, because, you know, if I had had someone on TV that looked like me, that spoke like me, that had my same background, and that person was gay and that person was confident about it, I think it would have made my life so much easier. So it's just been such a rewarding experience. And then, you know, my grandmother itself, we all can agree that coming out is hard. But how many times have you seen the conversation actually take place? And a conversation that's not your coming out, someone else is coming out. I mean, you don't see that on TV. You might see it on scripted television, and that's fine because it's a script, and the person playing that role is probably heterosexual, probably more likely than not. But how many times do you see it unscripted? And how many times do you see it between a person and their 94-year-old grandmother who is from Pakistan, lived in India, doesn't speak very much English, has had, my late grandmother, had hearing problems. How many times do you see that? And I said, you don't see that. And this is my opportunity. The network has given me this platform, and I want to use it as positively as possible. Sure, reality TV is fun. Sure, we like to see someone toss a table, throw a drink at someone's face. It's all great. It's fun. It's entertaining. It's Bravo. But how many times do you see something that actually changes you? That's actually very impactful for you. That helps you grow. So I said, this is it. I've reached a point where I did not want to be dishonest to my grandmother anymore. I didn't want to lie to her. Every time she would ask me, when are you getting married? Why don't you have a girlfriend? At first I would blame it on my brother because he was the older sibling, and in Indian culture, usually the elder sibling gets married first, just as first in line. Then he got married, so I was like, oh crap, what am I gonna do now? She would meet Nicholas, and she would ask my mom in private, why is this man always with him? And then one time she asked, we have a dog, and one time my grandmother asked, oh, does he help with the dog? My mom, of course, she was like, perfect, cha-ching, let me run with it. So then we said he helps with Theo, and
Dog walker.
meanwhile, my grandmother's, wow, my grandson's doing so well in life. He has a permanent caretaker for Theo that travels with him. But it was just this constant line to her that I didn't want to do anymore because she was a very special and important woman in my life. So it was just a confluence of factors that made that moment the right time to do it.
And it was an amazing moment. It really was. After the cameras stopped rolling, did that conversation continue?
It did. There was just so much happening in that moment. I was coming out in my parents' back patio. There are probably 10 production people around me, but you just, in that moment, you forget that they're there. You forget about the camera guys, forget about the producers, the audio guy, the mic guy. And, once we were done, they all left. I could see my grandmother was still just struggling to understand what exactly had just happened. She, bless her heart and bless her soul, she just could not understand what reality TV was. One time I walked out all dressed
don't
up.
Understand it either.
I know, exactly.
Okay.
And one time I remember I walked out, it was Diwali, which is our Indian New Year, and I was dressed in a full fancy Indian outfit for a scene we were doing for Diwali. I remember I walked out in the living room and my grandmother said, there's my actor. And I wanted to tell you, but I'm not an actor, Nani, I'm not an actor, it's not acting. But there's so many things for her to process. So, after the cameras had left, we sat down for dinner and I could see that she was still struggling with it. And I had to actually excuse myself from the table. I had an apartment downtown at the time. And I couldn't bear it because I could just see it in her eyes that she was finally understanding what was happening and what I had just told her. So I actually had to excuse myself from the table, get in my car and just drive straight back to my apartment and, just put that moment in time, just file that away somewhere in the back of my mind. But she came around, I brought him a few days later to the house to meet her. And
the dog walker.
The dog walker, now boyfriend. And she embraced him, literally, and she embraced him with her heart. So the end result was everything I could have asked for.
It's a very powerful moment. I mean, I remember watching it myself and just feeling uncomfortable watching it. But uncomfortable because it was so powerful and because it reminded me of my coming out. It reminded me of how difficult it is for people to go through. So I really think it's something that's worth watching for you to have an idea, through your eyes to understand what that's like and how difficult it can be to your family. Because I think we are at a point today where we have progressed a lot. However, I almost kind of think that we're at a point where it's more accepted generally, in the society. But I think that at the family level, there's still a lot of work to be done. So I think that kids today, yes, it's a little easier because they feel like maybe their friends will accept them. But I think that the family struggle is still very much there because I know parents who are allies and they would absolutely be fine with someone being gay, but maybe not their son.
Luis, you nailed it because that's exactly right. It's easy to say I'm an ally. It's easy to go to the Pride Parade. It's easy to donate to your favorite, not-for-profit LGBT organization. But when it's your own kid and when it really hits home, that's the true test of how much you really support the community.
Right. I really appreciate your coming out story, especially because not only someone who is showing the South Asian community how to do it and how to be accepting and how it's a good thing for you, for your family, for your upbringing, but also because you're a professional, a very successful professional, because that's another struggle. I think a lot of parents, they they just want to make sure you're going to be having a good life, so you can marry, you can have kids, but also that you can be successful career-wise. That was a big struggle with my parents. Like, whoa, are you going to now be able to be a successful attorney? Are you going to be able to work at a big law firm? And they're really proud that I do currently work at a big law firm, a very successful one. And that's very important for your parents. So for your coming out story specifically, because you are a successful person, it's very important for others to see that you can be out and also accomplish those things in life, and the parents can see that. I think it's important. So think of it. So we talked a lot about family karma. We have a 1-minute clip that we can play, a little bit of a teaser. It is a reality show, but I did binge watch it for the last couple of weeks, so I've seen every episode. I actually liked it a lot, and I'm not a reality show person at all. But the show is not just a reality show because it's a reality show that's things are not really set up. They're just following these, Indian families in the US. So the moments are not created or manufactured. They're actually real moments. So it is very educational as well.
This is not the Kardashians.
Not the Kardashians. A little bit of overlap, maybe. So
There's
very,
a lot in that 30 seconds.
very
How long do we
entertaining.
have to unpack all of that?
So I mean, particularly, I would like to know a little bit about the show. Did you feel at one point that could I be out on the show? Is a gay character going to be okay? Was there a moment where it was embraced, or was it kind of, oh, maybe not him? Because you were part of the community, right? It wasn't. They couldn't say you're not part. There were these are families that you grew up with, so they were all your friends from when you were a kid. So was there a moment where they said, well, maybe let's not show him, or?
No, I don't think there was as much of a concern of being, an openly gay cast member. One, because it's Bravo, and Bravo really does embrace the community, and a lot of the customer base or the viewer base is gay. But two, I didn't want to be that closeted person on the show. That was the opposite of what I wanted to do, because then, again, it would just be that stagnant. There wouldn't be that progression. So I wasn't worried. I wasn't concerned. I was the opposite. I wanted to put myself out there. I wanted to be confident and strong about it, because I think that's what people wanted to see on the show. And I think that's what viewers want to see who are struggling with it. Was I nervous about some things? Sure. For instance, we were doing long distance season 1, and Nicholas had come to visit for the first time since we started filming, and the crew was at the house, and we say goodnight to my parents, and then we go to our bedroom to sleep for the night, and they wouldn't leave, the crew, and that's one thing, you don't get to decide when they leave. That very end, when she's like, take off my mic and no one's going there, that's not how this works. They get to decide when the mic comes off, and they get to decide whether that's what you sign up for, right? So I remember thinking, okay, well, we're going to bed now, and that kind of thing made me a little uncomfortable, because that was more so a very private moment, being in public, being filmed. We ended up just putting up the light and going to sleep because I was like, there's no other way they're going to leave the room. So there were moments like that. And I will say, season 1 wasn't as bad. Season 2 got a little bit more uncomfortable because it was a little bit more of an inside look into our relationship. There is going to be a new season 3, which is not inside information. It's been publicly announced, but I will say that season is a lot of us planning our biracial interfaith gay wedding. And that had a lot of very uncomfortable conversations from his side of things and from my side of things. And that's when the relationship and the cultural differences was really put to a test, because that's when you're planning a wedding, anyone who's planning a wedding can really attest to the fact that that's when you are just like butting heads on everything. This was extra butting heads. So that you'll have to see. And I think that's when you're going to really see the uncomfortable conversations happen, more so than the first season.
Okay. Because Nicholas's background, I think his family background is evangelical Christian family.
Nicholas comes from a very conservative family, and a very religious family from a smaller town in Michigan. So, it's just funny to think about it, because now my parents have come such a long way with me being gay. In fact, I tell my mom sometimes she should be marching in the parade, representing PFLAG, parents of lesbian and gay youth. She's so supportive of it now. it was more so like trying to, now we have to focus on like his family. And you wouldn't think that, you know, because his family's been here for generations. Mine just came. So it's interesting to see that dance back and forth between our family, my family and his family, and my customs and his customs.
Yeah, I think it's an interracial problem. Race has nothing to do with it, and different families, whichever race, you know, I know people say, oh, South Asian families can be really difficult, or Latino families can be really difficult, but that's depends on which family you're
Yeah.
talking to
I think families can be
Oh,
different, period.
in general.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, very much so. So one thing that you mentioned about the microphone cannot come off, but you are a practicing attorney, right? And you have to still adhere by the professional rules of responsibility and ethics. So how do you balance that? Are you going to give up your attorney career now for, you know, Bravo TV or?
Well, so that, interestingly enough, I was more concerned about that. The gay thing didn't concern me. The practicing attorney did, because like you said, I'm a professional. A lot of my fellow castmates, some of them are professionals, but a lot of them work in family businesses. They're not going to get fired by their mom. They're not going to, you know, be reported for doing something unethical. So not unethical, but even something unprofessional. So I had to be confident enough in myself to know that I won't put myself in that situation. I won't cast that unprofessional light or embarrass myself, more importantly, embarrass my firm. I knew that viewers could be colleagues, could be former colleagues, could be potential clients, current clients. I mean, all of these things are the things that are going through my head. So that was something that made me really nervous, but I knew that that's not me, that I'm not that person. I tend to be level-headed. I know how important it is to think about what you're saying before the words actually come out of your mouth. It is so easy in life and in, more importantly, in show, to get canceled, where we live in cancel culture now. You say one thing that's taken out of context, and that could destroy everything that you work for, whether you're on a TV show or not, even in the practice of law. So that is something that I really had to work with, and understand myself before I was ready to sign, you know, give myself to the network and sign on the dotted line.
You seemingly balanced it quite well. Now there's season 3 coming. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I hadn't seen the announcement. I'm still working on season 2, or season 1 rather. So what's next? I mean, do you plan to stay practicing law for a while? Do you hear from clients of, oh, hey, I saw you on TV? Is that something that you find yourself having to explain or have conversations about?
Well, clients and funny enough, opposing counsels. That actually is very interesting. When an opposing counsel, before we start getting into the meat of our litigation dispute, is like, "Oh, I saw you on the show. How is it?" And then we start fighting, and it's like, "Well, now let's just set the tone for a really awkward fight." So yeah, it has happened that I've talked to clients, I've talked to opposing counsels, and they've heard of the show, they've maybe watched the show. But I think the future for me is, as long as the show continues, as long as I'm given a platform to tell my story, I'm going to do it. I do intend on continuing to practice law when I can. You know, things obviously get very busy when we're in production, and it's balancing a lot of different things at once. But as long as I could continue practicing, I want to do that. I would love in the next, 3, 5, 6 years to start doing some more pro bono work. My dream would be to partner with a law school clinic that does immigration law and work on LGBT asylum cases. If I could add that to the mix of filming a show, practicing law, and doing that, I would love to, because I can't imagine living in a country where you can't be yourself, and being yourself would make you feel threatened and scared. And even if I could help one person escape that, it would just mean the world to me. And I think it would, maybe make practicing a little bit more self-fulfilling, and just make me feel good about, what I'm doing with my degree. So yes, every intention to continue practicing, every intention to continue being on Family Karma.
Staying in Miami.
And staying in Miami.
Despite the beach and despite the ocean.
You're not even a Miami boy.
Staying in Miami. Now maybe I am a reformed Miami boy.
But I think that we have probably about 10 minutes left. I don't know if you want to turn to questions to the audience.
We wanted to make sure everybody had an opportunity, so we're not monopolizing the conversation. We've got a mic traveling, so if you've got a question, raise your hand. I don't know if Nicholas is taking applications for dog walker, but we can check that. We've got one over there.
Hi.
Hey.
Does that work?
Yes,
Okay.
You're good.
I'm Kirsten, big Bravo fan. Nice to meet you both. My question is just like, what was your biggest surprise with like filming, and like how did it change your life? Like how do you feel it changed your life? And I guess you are happy you did it. You already said you're happy you did it. So yeah, those two questions. Thanks.
I think the biggest surprise once I started filming the show was the art of conversing with someone. Because in a non-camera setting, we're all sort of just talking at once, right? You're at dinner, everyone's just talking over each other. It's like, you're not really paying attention and listening to the person. Sometimes you are, many times you are, but oftentimes it's just like, well, I want to say what I want to say now, regardless of what you just said. When you're filming, you can't do that, because when you're filming, the conversations are so important. That's what viewers need to see, because that's how they build the image of you in their head. So that conversing is very one-on-one. There's an art to doing that, and it's a very special art that I feel like not many people can do. So that was one time, like that was one thing I had to get used to in a group setting with my fellow castmates. We'd have to really listen to what the other person was saying, wait our turn, and then talk. Because then all that footage they're getting, it's useless, because you can't really decipher what people are saying. And Kristen, I totally forgot your second question. I think it was, how did it make me feel, or
If you're
How
happier
did it
now.
change your life?
how did it change my life? People see us on the street and they want to take pictures. That's cool. Again, because it's not like you're an actor or an actress. You went to acting school, like you're used to it. Like I went from no one knowing really who it was. I mean, then to being on a street and people are recognizing you, like, oh, Amrit, and I'm like, oh, person I don't know. So that changed. That changed my life in that way. It opened up the door for a lot of opportunities. Whether it was speaking engagements like this one, or just one-on-one conversations with people that I could tell were struggling, that needed my help. So in that sense, it gave another meaning to my life that there wasn't before.
Okay, it's on. Hey, hi. So I'm a gay litigator. We have come a long way in terms of society, but one thing that you guys haven't discussed, which is important for litigators, is the jury, who isn't necessarily as open in society. So I was curious as to how you approach maybe your conduct at trial when you're in front of a jury versus conduct here, so to speak.
That's a great question, and I'll try to answer that as best as I can, because truthfully, I've done a lot of pretrial work. My cases typically never get to trial, so I actually haven't been in front of a jury. But one way to compare that question is, Luis had asked me the other day, a client, sort of the same thing, right? How do you conduct yourself in front of a client? Because you have to be very careful. You don't know these people, even a potential client. Are you out to them? Are you not out to them? Do you hide the fact? And I think you just really have to use your discretion. I think as an attorney, being gay is something personal to you. Does it have to do with your case? Probably not. Does it have to do with your client? Probably not. So you have to think, okay, I'm not telling you pretend to be someone you're not. If you have certain mannerisms, those are your mannerisms. If you have a way of speaking, that's your way of speaking. But going out of your way to let a jury know that you're gay, does it really help your case? I don't think so. If you don't do it for the wrong reasons, right? Don't say, oh, I think I see a member of the jury that might be LGBT. Maybe if I kind of give them like a wink and like do that, they might side with my client. I don't think that's right. And even with a client, like just look at the circumstances with a client. When you asked me, I thought that was a really great question. I was like, how would I do that? It really just depends. Is it your client? Is it a partner's client? How long has that client had a relationship at the firm? How much are you going to have to deal with that client face to face? If you're not, and do you think coming out to that client would destroy the relationship with the firm? It's a tough one. It's a tough one, and you just have to use your discretion. You know, for me, if it was a client that I was not going to interface with on a day-to-day, and I just sort of as a one-off meeting, and it wasn't even my client, maybe not. If I could tell that client would have an adverse reaction, and maybe that client would leave the firm. I probably personally wouldn't, because I don't think that's fair. If it's one of my clients that I'm going to be dealing with on a day-to-day basis, yes, this is who I am. I'm going to go meet you at dinner. I'm going to bring my husband. I'm not going to lie to you and say, let me bring the wife, or the wifey's at home. I'm not. But I think it really just depends on the circumstances.
I would just say that the last trial I was at, I actually practiced speaking in my book.
It's tough. I mean, it really is tough because you can't be someone you're not. That's not fair. That's not fair to you. So it's a tough question.
I think for the clients too, you also have the balance that you have to maintain, because clients appreciate you being your authentic self. So
Absolutely.
you really have to, at one point, if you're hiding it, and the client comes to that information, they might think, oh, what else is this person not being honest with me about? So I think that at one point, when you do have a relationship client, you have to be your authentic self. You don't have that.
Yeah, and even with higher ups at the firm, for instance, and on my first firm, my current firm, my first firm out of law school, I remember I didn't know how my partners would react to me being gay. So I remember the first holiday party, I brought a girl. I told my friend Jill, I said, listen, just do the whole girlfriend thing. I'll put my hand on your waist, blah, 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 blah. And then I remember even one time, the senior partner of my firm wanted to take me out for a couple of drinks. And we went out. I said, oh yeah, that girl is so pretty at the bar. And I was like, totally. And then I finally came out to him, and I remember him being so upset that I hadn't told him before, and just being so disappointed that I thought he would react in an adverse way. And oftentimes we create these assumptions in our head, and we perceive a person completely wrong. And I think you just have to realize that we live in a time where people are accepting to diversity, and they embrace diversity.
Yeah, it's great to see the change, the positive change for sure. But still, I think that there's still a lot of work to be done.
I agree. And you know what? It's all circumstances. I'm fortunate enough to be in a big city like Chicago. I was fortunate enough to be at a firm like Mayor Brown, where you guys have an affinity group and you encourage people to be their truest versions of themselves. You do events. And so maybe young attorneys who are living in different parts of the country, you might be practicing in a state where maybe it's not as accepted. So it's important to not forget that, just because we live in a huge city, a more liberal city, there are people out there that might not have that same sort of support system and colleagues that will encourage them to be who they are.
Yeah, I see that when we're doing interviews with law students, still, they're not sure if, I always try to make them comfortable, but without making any assumptions either, right? Because you can't. So, but you have to make them feel welcome to come out if they would like to, or with summers or whatever that might be. And you don't want to out anyone, even if your gate radar is going off. Could definitely be wrong.
I want to hit a point that someone made in the Q&A, since we're on the same topic. They asked, could you share advice on gaining more confidence as someone early in their career on their LGBT plus identity in the office environment? Do you have any other tips that you can add?
Not to push you on the spot or anything.
No, I'm trying to think, what advice would I give to a young LGBT attorney? Seek out those people at the firm who are obviously kind and who you are somewhat confident. Seek out those people you're more comfortable with. I mean, meet as many people as you can when you start practicing a firm, as many people as you can, attorneys, non-attorneys, admin. You never know who you're going to find at that firm who's going to support you. And I think that's important that you do that. And honestly, put yourself out there. I know it's tough and it's scary and you feel alone, but you'll be surprised who might be facing the same issues you are. You'd be surprised who might say, oh, I'm gay too. So make sure that you're just not doing it on an island by yourself, because that's very dark and that's very isolating. Make sure you do put yourself out there as much as you can and just meet as many of the people that you can at your firm.
Thanks. And we're going to just take one or two more questions since we started a little bit late.
Okay.
So we have a question up front.
Hey, I'm Pavna. So shifting focus a little bit to more of the South Asian aspect. I personally love the show, as you mentioned, love seeing full Indian cast. I also have gone through being different growing up and people not knowing my name and things like that. But two questions, I guess. Did it take your family or any family friends on the show convincing to be a part of something like this? And two, what has sort of the general reaction been from people extending beyond the cast? I'm sure you have an extensive family friend network, as many South Asians do, within your community, and I'm sure there can be a lot of judgment for many things. So just curious what the general reaction was.
So the first answer to that question, it didn't take convincing of the cast members, you know, us, my group of friends. Our parents, it did take some convincing. I don't quite think they understood what reality TV and Bravo meant. At least my parents, they're like, oh, so this is gonna be like Full House. And I said, no, this is gonna be the complete opposite of Full House, Mom and Dad. This is not gonna be like, oh, Uncle and Jesse, whatever. This is gonna be like really uncomfortable conversations, and just really honest and raw conversation. So maybe not convincing, but more explaining what this is gonna look like once this aired. And I think that was the case, and I'm sure a lot of my other castmates will tell you the same thing with their parents. It was more the parents convincing them to be part of it. Indians, generally people are private people, right? But I'm sure you know, Indians are very private, because Indians love to portray perfection. We all love to portray perfection. We all want to see perfect, but Indians more so sometimes because marriage is like so important. Kids are so important. Like you have to be perfect, perfect, perfect. You watch Bollywood movies, and all you see in Bollywood movies are like the woman and the man, and they're in love and they're singing in a field of flowers, and no one wants to show imperfections. And I think we had to make our parents understand that this is when our imperfections might surface, and not might, will surface, because myself and all my castmates, we all have things that we're struggling with, whether it's my one castmate, Bali, who has been divorced twice and is raising a child on her own. How many times do you see that in Indian culture? I mean, divorce is like very much frowned upon. It's not an option in Indian marriages. You know, we have another castmate who is in her late 30s and she's not married and she doesn't have kids. You don't really see that either, right? So I think all of our castmates, and me being gay is one thing, but we all have these imperfect stories that we're living in and through, and that we're trying to show the world, to show that you might be going through something that's not seen as traditional, but that's okay. Because sometimes you don't have to be the most traditional. You don't have to live the most traditional route. The second answer is how the perception. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback, a lot, especially from the South Asian community, because listen, this was our responsibility to go on TV and accurately represent the Indian community. And that's difficult. It's not easy because you have so many different types of Indians. You know, you have people from all the different areas of India. Some are, every state in India is different. So, you know, we needed to make sure that we were accurately representing our South Asian community. And some people have come up to me and like, well, that's not how we are. And some people are like, that's exactly how we are. But that's inevitable again, because you know, we live in a different part. We live in Miami. Maybe some Indian communities in other cities they might be more traditional. They might not be as liberal. So it's gone both ways, but I would say more of the reactions and the responses have been overwhelmingly positive.
No.
How about now? Okay, hi. Thank you. This has been fascinating. I can't wait to watch Family Karma with my Indian family. I married into an Indian family, but I took a first-year associate out to coffee right before this program, and I was telling her about it, and she's like, I want to be a reality show star. I want to be on The Bachelor and then have a spinoff with Bachelorette. And I'm a partner at a law firm and I'm old school. So I was like, you can't do that. I was like, you just that's crazy. You know, you're gonna put everything out there, you're gonna get drunk and you know what? And you know, if you want a corporate career, I don't think you can do that. But it sounds like you've done both. I thought you left law completely and you're able to juggle both. What is your advice to her then? Because I told her no way.
That's awesome, actually. That's very interesting. I would say it really depends on the nature of the show. If you're going to be on The Bachelor, The Bachelorette, or if you're, you know, when I did Family Karma, I made it a point to really talk to the network and talk to my producers and say, listen, where do you see this show going? What do you want out of this show? Because I'm not going to be, you know, the Housewives, and I don't want to get on TV and imbibe and drink myself silly. And you know, there are moments you'll see me drinking, and Luis and I talked about this, because just because we're attorneys, we are held to a higher standard. We are, but at the same time, we're still humans. We're not robots. We still like to drink. You know, we still like to go out. You saw me say the S word in the trailer. They beeped it out, but we all say it sometimes, right? So it's just knowing the limit. So it's one, knowing what kind of show it is. If I was approached to be on Real World, no, absolutely not. I know, you know, sometimes shows have like, I forget what it's called, there's a term for it, but it's when the cameras are rolling 24 hours and they're installed in your living spaces. No, that's not for me. That's not something I want to do as an attorney and even as a human. But I knew this one, they had really told me, you know, we want this one to be lighthearted. We want it to be about family. We want it to be a comedy. And that's what we want from the show. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to trust you guys. And it's all about how I did it, right? I made it a point to not go on TV and do those kinds of things. So yeah, I would say the type of the show, and then also you just have to use your own discretion about how you're conducting yourself.
I didn't even know The Real World was still on. Is MTV still a thing?
Yeah, The Real World.
I was around for the original Real World.
Now they're doing
I
the
don't know if
reunions,
they-
I
if they
think.
I
still
guess
have it.
Big Brother would be today's comparison.
Big Brother, exactly.
Fair enough. Any other questions?
Well, we have run out of time, so please save any questions that you have for our meet and greet. We have a bar that's open and some treats for you. I first wanted to thank Amrit and Nicholas for coming today. Thank you so much for joining us here at Mayor Brown. And thanks to Britt and Luis for being our moderators.
I want to say thanks to Luis for putting this together. Thanks to the affinity groups for all working on it. It was a great program. I'll finish where I left you back in 2017. I'm glad you came home.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're always welcome home. Nicholas, you are as well. The invitation extends to family. So thank you both very much for sharing your time with us and sharing your story with us. And like I said, I'm catching up on episodes, so now I've got to wait for season 3. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Britt.
Thank you so much.
Hope you'll stay.